Every day, I share another story from the Golden Age and the moments that shaped an unforgettable era. If you'd like to keep these memories alive with me, hit subscribe. It costs you nothing, but it means a lot. Thank you for being here. Now let's begin. At 92 years old, Willie Nelson isn't hiding anymore. The braids, the jokes, the outlaw image, all stripped away. What's left is a man who's stopped pretending. When he talks now, there's no rehearsed charm or witty lines, just raw truth. After walking that long, winding road, he's finally facing what he's been avoiding for decades. He's fought for every breath, every song, every chance at redemption. But lately, his voice shakes for a different reason. Friends whisper that he's calm now, almost too calm. Like a man who's made peace with something the rest of us don't dare to name. How could someone who survived fire, heartbreak, and near death itself suddenly sound ready to let go? Maybe because the boy who once learned to breathe through pain finally found silence that doesn't hurt. Willie Hugh Nelson came into this world on April 29th, 1933, in the tiny Texas town of Abbott, a speck of hope in the middle of the Great Depression. Back then, poverty wasn't just a condition, it was the air he breathed. His parents, Ira and May, were young and struggling to hold life together. His mother left when he was still a baby, promising she'd return someday. She never did. His father remarried, then disappeared too. By the time Willie was 6, he and his sister Bobby were orphans in everything but name, raised by their grandparents, poor farmers who believed faith and hard work could keep a soul alive. His grandfather, a blacksmith whose hands smelled like iron and smoke, placed a beat-up guitar in his small hands one day. The strings cut his fingers, but the sound, rough, raw, human, filled the emptiness left behind by people who'd walked away. When pneumonia took his grandfather, Willie sat beside the bed, counting every breath, terrified that if he stopped, the world would stop too. That rasping sound of lungs fighting for air haunted him forever. At 7 years old, he was already out in the cotton fields, sweating under the Texas sun, his hands torn and bleeding, his back bent before it ever finished growing. Each night, he'd cough from the dust and hum little tunes that didn't have words yet, melodies that helped him breathe through the pain. Music became his medicine, his only escape. When his fingers touched those strings, the silence didn't sting as much. The applause never mattered. What mattered was that somebody somewhere was listening. Willie once said, "I filled the silence with songs because no one else was talking to me." That silence became his first teacher, showing him what no school could, how to endure, how to stay humble, how to find peace in pain. He learned that not every wound needs to heal. Some just become part of who you are. And for Willie Nelson, that lesson shaped everything. The way he loved, the way he lost, and how he'd one day face the end with calm eyes and a steady heart. By the time he hit 20, survival had already replaced hope as his main goal. He bounced from one odd job to the next, trimming trees, fixing saddles, selling encyclopedias door to door. Every rejection, every unpaid bill became another verse in the unfinished song of his life. Nashville was supposed to be the dream, but instead it turned into another heartbreak. The record execs said his voice was too nasal, his look too plain, his songs too weird. But those songs, funny how time slips away. Nightlife, Crazy, carried more truth than anything those suits had ever heard. He sold them for a few $100 each, just to keep himself afloat. Other singers turned them into hits, while Willie just kept writing, kept pushing. He didn't get the money, but he got something more valuable, a hard lesson in how the world really works. And that lesson would carve the man who became a legend. The world doesn't pay you for honesty until you're too broke to need the truth anymore. In the 1960s, it looked like Willie's luck was finally turning. He found love again, or what felt like it, with his first wife, Martha Matthews. Together they had 3 kids, Lana, Susie, and Billy, building a small life in Fort Worth. From the outside, they looked like a family chasing dreams. But behind those walls, it was chaos. Arguments, unpaid bills, and guilt echoing through every room. Willie played smoky bars till sunrise, guitar in hand, while Martha sat at home, half asleep and half angry, surrounded by kids who couldn't understand why Daddy always had to leave. One night, after too many drinks and too much pain, things went too far. He lost control and pushed her into a river, but the instant it happened, fear snapped him back. He jumped in after her, terrified at what he'd almost done. That moment haunted him forever. Years later, he'd call it the lowest point of his life. Proof that love can twist into something dark when despair outweighs reason. Their marriage couldn't survive the storm, and neither could his belief in something as simple as peace. He remarried, divorced again, and by 1970, life dealt him another cruel blow. His house in Ridgetop, Tennessee went up in flames, taking with it every song, every photo, every memory of the man he'd been. Willie stood in the ashes, 40 years old, broke, heartbroken, and nearly done. The silence he'd spent years running from had caught up with him again. Nashville turned its back on him, the money dried up, and his faith in himself vanished. So, like always, he packed his guitar and hit the road. Back to Texas he went, where the air was tough but real. And there, in Austin, he found something wild and alive. The city didn't care about Nashville's rules. Cowboys jammed beside hippies, and preachers sang next to drunks. It was messy, loud, and honest. For the first time, Willie fit right in. The failed Nashville songwriter found his truth, and in 1973, Shotgun Willie dropped. The record execs called it unmarketable, but the people, they called it gospel. 2 years later, Red-Headed Stranger made him a legend. But fame didn't heal him. It just dressed up the pain in fancier clothes. The applause drowned out the silence, but never the ache. By the end of the 70s, Willie Nelson had become the face of outlaw country, wild, fearless, unstoppable. But behind the fame was still that same boy who once watched his grandfather fight for breath. He'd traded dusty fields for bright lights, yet that old heaviness still sat deep in his chest. The world finally heard his music, but they never really heard the man. They saw the icon, not the son who couldn't save the one he loved most. By the 1980s, Willie Nelson had everything the world said should make a man happy. Platinum records, sold-out tours, and a reputation as the rebel who rewrote country music. But what fame gave him in applause, it stole back in silence. The road never ended, the nights never stopped, and the ghosts of his past rode along with him. His voice, once his escape, became a reminder of the pain he could never sing away. The cheers got louder, but the loneliness grew heavier. And nothing, no stage, no song, no spotlight, could prepare him for what came next. It was the kind of pain that doesn't make you stronger. It just breaks you down. On Christmas Day, 1991, Willie's world shattered. That morning was supposed to be filled with laughter and family. Instead, the phone rang with the kind of call no parent should ever hear. His oldest son, Willie Nelson, was gone. He was only 33. Billy had his father's talent and his battles. He carried the same weight, trying to live up to a name the world claimed as its own. Music gave him moments of peace, but depression dragged him into darkness. Just days before his death, father and son had planned to record a gospel album together, a final harmony that would never be sung. That project was supposed to heal old wounds, but instead, it became a eulogy. Willie was crushed. He had survived flames, heartbreak, and poverty, but this was something else. There was no villain to blame, no lesson to pull from the ashes, no song that could ever make it right again. His sister Bobby said he went quiet. Not peaceful quiet, but the kind that comes after a scream. For months, he barely said a word. He'd sit alone on his ranch, staring out at empty fields, trapped inside memories he couldn't escape. Every missed call, every night away replayed like a film he couldn't stop watching. He'd chosen the stage over home, and that choice now felt like a wound that would never close. There are no songs for pain like that. He once admitted there was no melody deep enough to carry it. When Willie finally stepped back on stage, people noticed the change immediately. The songs were slower, the pauses longer, like every word carried the weight of what he'd lost. When he sang Always on My Mind, the crowd didn't just listen. They felt it. You could hear a father's apology wrapped inside every trembling note. Willie once said, "I've lost a lot, but losing Billy was the only thing that ever broke me completely." And you could tell he meant every syllable. But grief didn't come alone. Another storm was waiting behind the curtain. While he was mourning his son, the IRS came knocking. And they didn't bring condolences. They brought numbers. Cold, brutal numbers. In 1990, they seized nearly everything. $32 million in unpaid taxes, a mountain of debt built from bad management and misplaced trust. His ranch, his studio, even his gold records, gone. Willie could have declared bankruptcy, but that wasn't his way. He said he couldn't sleep knowing honest people wouldn't get paid. So he did what only Willie Nelson would do. He turned his pain into music again. He recorded the IRS tapes, "Who'll Buy My Memories?" and sent the profits straight to the government. For years, he toured non-stop, singing through the weight of loss, humiliation, and exhaustion, paying every dollar back with sweat and soul. He'd lost his home, his son, and maybe even his faith in fairness, but not his will to keep going. He joked later, "The IRS took my stuff, but they couldn't take my soul." But behind that grin, there was truth soaked in pain. Those years taught him what death really means. Not one moment, but a slow fading of everything that ever mattered, piece by piece, until only breath remains. And that breath, that became his final battle. As the 21st century rolled in, Willie wasn't fighting fame or fortune anymore. He was fighting his own body. The man who had outlasted every storm now faced the one thing he couldn't outsing: time itself. His lungs, the same ones that carried his voice across decades and dusty highways, began to give out. The years of smoke, whiskey, and endless nights on the road finally caught up to him. It started small, a cough that never went away, a wheeze after every encore. But by 2015, there was no ignoring it. Doctors told him the truth straight: emphysema. If he didn't make drastic changes, his singing days were over. For a man whose whole existence was built on music, it felt like a death sentence. So Willie fought back. He underwent experimental stem cell treatment to repair the scarred tissue in his lungs. It was rough, painful, and forced him into something he'd always avoided: stillness. Months of recovery, no touring, no spotlight, just silence. Friends said something shifted in him then. He wasn't running anymore. He started facing what he'd been dodging his whole life: the truth. He began talking about death, not with fear, but with acceptance. "I don't fear it," he told the Associated Press in 2019. "I've lived long enough to know it's coming, and that's fine." Those words weren't tough guy talk. They were surrender. A man finally at peace with the ending of his song. It's the calm of a man who's already watched too many people he loved fade into the horizon. In 2022, when COVID nearly took Willie Nelson down at age 90, most thought that was the end. His lungs were scarred, his breath fragile. And when he woke up one night gasping for air, his wife Annie feared she was watching his final moments. Doctors rushed in, machines humming, trying everything to keep him alive. For days, he floated somewhere between here and gone. His breathing was shallow, his voice silent. But somehow, he fought his way back. When he finally spoke, it wasn't about fear or pain, it was about peace. "I've been close enough to dying," he whispered, "to know it ain't something to be scared of." Those words hit different. Not bravado, just truth. Everyone around him said that near-death moment changed him forever. He grew quieter, softer, more reflective. He stopped measuring time in tours or gold records and started counting mornings. If he could open his eyes and catch the Texas sunrise from his porch, that was enough. He didn't chase headlines or trophies anymore. His only goal was simple: keep breathing long enough to say goodbye to the people who gave his life meaning. And with time, breathing itself took on a whole new meaning. For Willie, every breath became a memory. Every inhale carried the smell of Abbott, Texas. Every exhale carried the ghosts of those he'd loved and lost. To most people, dying means the end. But to Willie, it's just another way of breathing. One last song, sung in silence. By 2024, the story had come full circle. Willie Nelson had outlived nearly everyone who once shared his stage. Johnny Cash, gone. Waylon Jennings, gone. Chris Christopherson, the poet who once called Willie his brother in song, passed that September at 88. Just like that, the highwaymen, the wild outlaws who rewrote American music, were down to one. The last voice standing, trembling but still unbroken, belonged to the red-headed stranger from Abbott, Texas. He didn't call it loneliness anymore. He called it the quiet. But those who knew him could see how deeply it haunted him. Every time he picked up his guitar, he was playing for ghosts. For Billy, his son, for Bobby, his sister and first harmony, for Waylon, Johnny, and Chris, the brothers who turned rebellion into family. Now, when he walked on stage, he didn't see fans. He saw memories. The cheers washed over him, but his eyes looked past the crowd into that invisible space where his friends once stood. That year, he released The Border and The Last Leaf on the Tree, two albums that sounded less like music and more like confessions. Stripped, honest, aching, songs about legacy, mortality, and the strange comfort of knowing your road ahead is short. He didn't sing them as farewells. He sang them as prayers. "I've made peace with the idea," he said in an interview. "I've had more good days than bad ones. And when it's time, that was Willie. No drama, no fear, just truth. Even with death sitting quietly nearby, Willie refused to slow down. In 2025, he teamed up with Bob Dylan for the Outlaw Music Festival. 35 cities, thousands of miles, one more defiant run. He sang slower, softer, but that same fire still burned in his voice. Each show felt like a goodbye that never said the words. Fans waited for an announcement, a grand finale, but it never came. On the last night in St. Louis, the lights dimmed, the crowd held its breath, and Willie smiled. "I'll see you down the road," he said. No speeches, no tears, just pure truth. That's how legends leave, quietly on their own terms. Now, at 92, Willie lives peacefully at his Luck Ranch in Spicewood, Texas. 700 acres of calm skies, horses, and stillness. He wakes up early, sips black coffee, stretches into yoga, and tends his garden. Beside him, his wife Annie, his anchor through 3 decades of chaos, sits with him every morning, watching the sunrise. The air out there is cleaner, lighter, easier to breathe. He doesn't need applause anymore. The world has already heard his voice. What matters now is stillness, the slow rhythm of wind through cedar trees, the faint echo of a guitar somewhere in the distance, and the quiet understanding that even legends eventually run out of time. When asked recently what scares him most about dying, Willie smiled and said, "Nothing. I've already seen what it looks like. I've said goodbye to everyone I ever loved. I just hope they're waiting when I get there, and maybe that's the real reason he's ready. Not because he's tired of living, but because he's finally made peace with leaving." For Willie Nelson, death isn't an ending. It's a reunion. The final verse in a song that started nearly a century ago in a small Texas town, when a little boy first picked up a guitar and tried to turn silence into sound. He's faced every kind of loss: family, fortune, friends, even his own health. And somehow, he still kept singing. But now, at 92, Willie isn't fighting the silence anymore. He's learning to rest in it. Drop your thoughts in the comments below, hit that like button if you felt something real, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories.